Thank you all for coming out this evening. Our forum here tonight is to talk about school safety and the community's response, both the Falmouth Public Schools, the Falmouth Police Department, the Falmouth Fire Department. We're all here tonight to talk about what we do to ensure safety for all kids, for all staff, and for our community. So there's our goal. So what I'd like to do for just a minute is ask our panel to introduce themselves and their role in the security here that we work on in the school district. So I'd like to start with Chief Dunn.
Hi, Edward Dunn, Police Chief. And what I do is I oversee, again, the police department and work with the schools, make sure we have the officers assigned properly.
Good evening, Jamie Donahue. I am the school resource officer with the high school and the junior high.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Smith. I'm the captain in Specialized Services, which is the detective division, and I work with the emergency management team in practicing and training and setting up the drills at each of the schools, all 7.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Sykes. I'm one of the adjustment counselors that works for the district. I work at the Morse Pond School, and I'm a member of that school's safety committee.
If I speak up, can everybody hear me? So my name is Michael Small. I'm the fire chief here in Falmouth. Falmouth Fire Rescue is fire and EMS, if they can introduce themselves. So I oversee everything that has to do with fire prevention, fire suppression, emergency medical services. I'm also the emergency management director in Falmouth, so all of that goes pertain to this. So I'm also the guy that's in charge of everything to do with emergency management, sheltering, and so forth. So that's my role.
Craig O'Malley, EMS advisor for Falmouth Fire Rescue Department.
My role is in general, is to oversee all the ambulance responses in town. But also we've been working together with the police and the school department over the last few years to help implement some of their plans.
Hi, I'm Tim McLaughlin, the principal of the Morse Pond School. I oversee the Morse Pond Safety Committee, as well as working with Ms. Sykes to develop our response for emotional support for our students and staff during crises.
I'm Greg Kennedy, Director of Transportation and Safety and Security in the schools with Bob here.
I'm Bob Griffin. I'm Safety Coordinator. I coordinate with the police and the fire and other agencies in the town. I've been responsible for working on the CEMP, which is the emergency plan.
Thank you. We also have Patrick Murphy, who is the Director of Finance and Operations, and he is also the chair of the district-wide safety team. So how do we look at our work around school safety? You heard Mr. Griffin mention the community emergency management plan. So from a community level and community resources, it's all about building relationships and rapport with other departments in town, the police department, the fire department, but also with our DPW and certainly our town manager's office. It's a community effort to create the community emergency management plan, to update it continuously, and to practice what's in our emergency management plan. So if you think of it as a funnel and you think of the community piece here, we then bring it down to the district level, and we have a district level safety team. And at our meetings that we have with all of the district leaders, including our principals, we practice and we talk about drills, we set up safety protocols, we do tabletop exercises to actually run through a drill that we may face at some point. Then we go to our building level, and every one of our schools in this district has a building level safety team. And so they work with the district level safety team to make sure that what we're discussing at the district level is actually in practice at the building levels. And then once we go from the building level, it comes right into the classroom level, and every single teacher and staff member is trained on the safety protocols. So we've had questions that have come up, and as they came in, I just kind of kept track of them. And these are some questions that I hope we answer throughout the night, and if we don't, we can go back to them. I'm not going to read every one of them, but I'll highlight a few. One is the role of the school resource officer. What is that? What does it look like? And why do we only have one? That's come across my desk more than once. The community school liaison officers, what is their function? How do they work with our schools? Lockdown drills. Why are we doing them? How do we do them? The K-9 unit that we bring into Lawrence and Falmouth High School on occasion. Why do we do that? What is that about? What's a reunification drill? We started reunification drills last year, Greg? So we're in our second year of practicing. If there were to be a crisis, how do we then reunify kids with their families? And we've been running our schools through that. Transportation, and how is transportation connected with safety? That's come across my desk. Fingerprints and quarries. And what's incident command and how does it function? So I'm hoping that we answer those questions and any other questions that you may bring up tonight. So at this point, I will turn the program over to Patrick Murphy.
Hello, my name is Pat Murphy. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations, and I try to effectively push forward what we refer to as the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan in this district, and always in kind of an iterative method, improve what we do. And before we get into some of the details, I'm going to tap Bob Griffin, who I have to compliment Bob. He's been working on this stuff for many years, both as a volunteer, as an employee of the school district, now as a retiree. And Bob, please just give your historical perspective on the development of the CEMP and then sort of how we've gotten into where we are right now.
The CEMP is a comprehensive emergency plan. It's an all hazards plan. We use the incident command system based on the National Incident Management System. In 2008, we started to build this program. We had several people, Captain O'Neill from the police department, Deputy Smith from the fire department, Sue Dowling, Bob Ross, and me. We've hammered out our own CEMP. It was a struggle for those years to really get it going, to be accepted. Each school did their own thing. There were 7 different schools and 7 different plans. Eventually, we started to yield results. One was that Newtown, Connecticut happened. And then I was taken a little more seriously because here it's happening in Connecticut, in a town that looks a lot like Falmouth, and maybe it could happen here. We learn from each incident. We study each incident. And then when Bonnie Gifford came to be the superintendent, she started to go to the drills with us. And the drills are all set up in the CEMP. What we do, what goes on at the drill. We do a hot wash afterwards. And when Nancy came, we started to have a plan. The results had to be written down, and any corrective action had to be stated. So in 2014, we replaced the original 2008 CEMP, and it is accepted, was signed by the school administration so that all schools would participate and we would do things the same way. There'd been some change in administration in some of the schools. So in the past few years, we've really made great gains in everybody working together. There are different schools, different age levels we work with, but we all work together. We listen to each other, and we meet at the schools, and we bring it back and work as a district-wide. The CEMP was drawn up. Pat Dillon, who was a principal at Morris Pond, was amazingly helpful in helping with that. So we have the CEMP. It's 170 pages. It outlines what we do and how we do it. We practice the plan and then review it.
So, Bob, thank you very much for that historical background. The other document that we use to give us some context and structure is this document that's listed up there. And this is a big topic. And how do you begin to drill into this topic on a detailed level, on a day-to-day level? You have to sort of break it down. And the way the state has provided some guidance under sort of the categories of prevent, prepare, respond, and recover has been helpful. It's a way for us to begin to think about this topic and kind of tick off the things that we need to get done on a regular basis. So under the topic prevention, obviously that's one of the most important things. And two big areas that I'd like to ask folks to speak about a little bit is one, our SRO work, and two, what our safety teams do. So I'm not going to pick on specific people, but I'm giving you some guidance that maybe Jamie could jump into talk about some of the work of an SRO. What is an SRO, and what does an SRO do in this district?
So SRO stands for School Resource Officer. My role as a school resource officer is to be present in the schools. I'm an informal counselor. I'm available to kids if they have questions. If they have scenarios that they want to discuss, I'm available for the administration of the schools as well. Also, I work closely with the adjustment counselors. I'm there to ensure the safety and security of the school, and I've gotten a lot of different. It's kind of like the school is a community. I have the high school and the junior high are much like working in the town, except for you're working with younger people. I have had sexual assaults be disclosed to me just by being in the school. I've had, things of that nature. I'm there. I've had a student come in and ask about a speeding ticket that she got, and I was able to explain, a citation. This is what you do. It's a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of not only with staff but also with kids.
Thanks. Now, can maybe Tim,
Could I
you
just
want to
make
jump in?
a
Yep.
couple of comments? First and foremost, school resource officers are police officers, and I think it's really important to remember that. Secondly, so Jamie actually does come under the chief, but she works in the schools. The second piece is the question has come up. We used to have 2 school resource officers. We had one assigned to Falmouth High School and one assigned to the Lawrence School full-time. Times kind of changed, and we went down to 1, and I'll let the chief kind of explain that. But I just think it's important to remember that she is firstly and foremost a police officer.
Yeah, but back in 2008, 2009, we did have 2 school resource officers, but you have to remember back in 2008, 2009, the economy was good. Falmouth Police Department had 66 officers. 2009, 2010, the economy tanked. When the economy tanked, we started losing officers to other towns. The town needed money back. Then, under Chief Riello, we gave back funds for 8 positions. And we had to cut down the officers. We had to bring them back into the schools. We even had to cut down our detectives because we needed police officers to answer calls. At one point, we were without school resource officers. And then we did put 1 back into the school, and it was shared between the Lawrence School and the high school. One other thing that we've done, because we don't want to forget the other schools, is that all our police officers visit those schools on a daily basis. So there is police presence at all the schools. And one of the things we just did last year was created substations in the schools. The North Falmouth School, the East Falmouth School, and the administration building, and we're talking about expanding that to all the schools. And what a substation is, it's where an officer can go and type his reports so he doesn't have to come back to the police station and do it. And at no time does anybody know when that police officer is going to be there. So those are some of the things that we've tried to think outside the box to keep police presence in the schools.
Thanks. So go ahead, jump in.
And one other thing we did is for each school that Jamie doesn't cover, we assign school liaison officers. So it kind of takes the burden off of Jamie a little bit, where these officers can be the first point of contact for school officials if they have an issue that might involve law enforcement. Also, Jamie kind of, I believe, minimized our job a little bit. It's not a 9-to-5 job that she does often on weekends, middle of the nights. She's dealing with social media issues and is often reaching out to school staff to kind of put those things to bed. So she's doing a lot of work behind the scenes and off hours as well.
Thanks.
So can we spend a little time talking about the great work that has been started and continues around the school-based safety committees? So Tim or Greg or Bob, do you want to jump in on that?
Each school has a safety committee. We generally meet in the morning, although some of the other schools, the elementary schools, meet in the afternoon. And the principal, the assistant principal, the nurse, frequently the building manager, and other staff members join us for the meetings. It's one of the good ways that we listen to what the schools have to say. We just don't come in and say, well, we're all going to do it this way. We listen to see what the needs are in individual schools, because they could be the same needs in the other elementary schools, for example. Listening is very important to the district committee. We want to know what the other schools are doing. And for example, in one of the meetings, we had Morse Pond talk about their emergency plans and their medical safety team. One of the goals for this year's CEMP was to listen to parents and to get information out to parents, which is just what we're doing. As I say, we listen to the staff, we listen to the parents, and we listen to the students. I'm going to ask Tim just to talk about his perspective, because he has a very strong medical and district team.
So we have a lot of strong personalities in our safety team who care very deeply about our building. And I think it's great to have Greg and Bob at all of our meetings, because a lot of the questions we ask are, well, we're worried about this, we're worried about that. What are the other 6 schools doing? Have they addressed this yet? Have they thought about it? And, happily, the answer is usually yes, they're doing this, they're doing that. Sometimes it's not, and they can bring that idea back to the other teams. So it's great to have them as a common thread for all of our meetings. We have started doing medical emergency drills at Morse Pond. We had a planned one. We want to walk before we run. So we had a planned one where we told our staff, told our students that we were going to be doing a drill that day, and our nurse set up a drill without telling us what it would be. And as we move forward, we'll go to doing unannounced ones, different scenarios. We always make sure we meet and go over our notes, produce a little after-action report on what we can improve. I think our safety drills and fire drills of that nature have greatly improved over the last 3 years, just as a result of having this team and this group of people that come together and work so well together.
So you've segued right into prepare, which is all about drilling. And we do a nice job in this district doing regular drills, fire drills, intruder drills, and something that other districts do not do, reunification drills. So we've got some folks who are very involved in helping us create drills and reunification plans. Anybody want to speak on those?
While we're talking about preparation, I want to also just say that in all of the buildings, there's a lot of work being done on the prevention. Many of you parents are coming into the building now and are being asked to bring additional identification. We're piloting a new security badge system in our building, so that we are really doing a super job of hardening the facility. That's the term that's used, to really making sure that we're preventing unwanted intruders coming into the building, and that we know who's coming into the building and for what reason. So that prevention piece, I think, is really important.
Thanks.
I've taken the lead pretty much on the reunification piece of this whole project, and without going into details that I can't share with you, but some of you might have been involved if your child's school was in a drill that we've had in the last couple of years. We have systems in place to make sure that your child only gets dismissed to the person that you've put on your emergency card for your child. And on that note, because I am in transportation too, it's imperative, and I can't stress this enough, to keep those numbers, the emergency information numbers, up to date. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to contact parents and the phone number has been discontinued. In all these emergency drills, time is of the essence. So if we're not searching for phone numbers, it really helps us too. So please keep all that information up to date. Who you want your child maybe to be dismissed to in a plan. Nancy, I don't know how far we want to get into what our actual system would be, to contact parents and so forth during a reunification process. And this doesn't have to be a shooter or emergency type of thing like that. It could be something like the boiler's gone down and we have to evacuate the school. And the buses are all taken up by someone, so we have to get the kids to a certain location. They can't be in the building. It's all different reasons that we would do a reunification drill.
So can I hand it off to our folks from the fire and emergency and talk about some of your help with our drills?
So I certainly, I hate talking to these. If anybody needs me to, I will. Can everybody hear me okay? They can. Okay. So I can talk a little bit about the fire drills and so forth and the fire safety in the schools. It's sort of, fire drills in schools have been around since really schools have been around. So there really isn't anything earth-shattering with those and how they get conducted. We're fortunate in Falmouth, we have 3 full-time fire prevention people, and the drill schedule is laid out in the code in Massachusetts. They have to be 4 drills scheduled each year, 1 within the first 3 days of every school year, which we're very fortunate to be able to do. The fire safety things in the schools, our inspectional people are in here every year at the beginning of the schools, before the school year in all of the 5 school buildings to make sure that the fire alarm systems are up to date, to make sure that everything is code compliant. We communicate with the school people on issues, fire safety issues constantly. It sort of kind of has, fire safety sort of has a tendency to sort of fall into the background, especially with what's going on in the nation today. But we continue to hammer those drills home, and we continue to do that. There's still, I've got documentation in front of me from the state fire marshal from a couple months ago that, I can read to you. It's basically that even in the last 5 years, the number of school fires in Massachusetts continues to go down. Massachusetts still averages more than 160 school fires a year. Falmouth has school fires. We probably average 1 or so a year since I've been here. Almost always universally very small, almost always either sort of nuisance fires and trash barrels or so forth, vandalism fires caught by the detection system or caught by a staff member and extinguished by the janitor or by the custodian or by the school staff. But it's not an uncommon event. So we take that very seriously. There's a lot of code enforcement. We've had people question why they can't have paper displays on the walls because it's not fire safe. It doesn't meet code. But we do that on a quarterly basis. It's mandated. We do it because it's very important to do so. We can talk a little bit about how some of what we've done in the fire drill world, which has been gone on for 1,000 years, is now sort of morphing into the 21st century threat that schools are facing. So, but that's really sort of that's kind of the fire suppression end of it.
I was hoping you might mention one of your favorite topics, how you guys like to put together tabletop drills and other drills that.
So if you want to talk about that now, we are required once a year to talk to the superintendent's required to talk to the fire chief and the police chief once a year before the beginning of the school year to coordinate this stuff. We talk in Falmouth. Boy, we far supersede the once a year conversation we have to have. We communicate with each other constantly. Bob Griff's up in the fire station. They're members of the local emergency planning committee. We communicate way beyond anything required. So one of the things that we've been talking about lately was which we haven't done in a long time, is to set up what for us is going to be basically a mass casualty drill, which for us, a mass casualty is anything that's a certain number of patients or victims, whether it be a result of a fire. Most likely for us, it's a motor vehicle crash. But we wanted to sort of take that in a conversation that the police chief and the superintendent and I had a few months ago and sort of work in sort of the 21st century, sort of the stuff that's happening in the world today. So we're actually in the process right now of putting together a tabletop exercise in a month or so, and then we're going to do a full-scale event sometime in the fall that probably is going to involve a school bus accident with, I don't want to give all the twists away, but it's probably going to involve a school bus accident, which are things that we've had. We've had mass casualty incident school bus accidents in front of this building. And it's something that, sad to say, is, that's something that is potentially going to happen, a school bus accident full of kids. For us, for the fire department, and Lieutenant O'Malley, who is the EMS supervisor, is really the kind of point of contact on this. For us, a mass casualty incident is a mass casualty incident. I hate to minimize it, but it doesn't really matter what the mechanism is. For us, we have a very robust mutual aid system in place. We have small level MCIs, occasional large scale MCIs on a fairly regular basis, but not enough that we certainly want to train with. And then I'm sure we can morph into the incident command system and so forth once we trickle that down. So.
The other drill, we've talked about reunification drills, some of the tabletops, the fire drills. We speak a little bit about intruder drills that have become regularly practiced in our schools.
So with the police department, we try to make our either lockdown drills or intruder drills a little bit more of a surprise to the staff at the respective schools. So we practice in every school multiple times a year. In the case of an intruder drill, the one that we did last year at the end of the school year, the principal, Mary Gans, was aware enough to catch my intruder that I put into the school within seconds of that person walking into the school. So these things are designed not to see people fail, but to see if there's any deficiencies, things that we can correct, things we can get better at. And that goes for the lockdown drills, the intruder drills. We test the staff. We are always looking to change the scenarios, the whole dynamic of what time of the day that the drill might take place. I don't want to give away all the secrets, but you can just kind of imagine, like, how do you get off the playground? What happens if it's lunch? What about a bus situation? So we practice these so that we're prepared if we have a real event. We don't want to just go in at 9 o'clock every day, every time we do a drill, and everyone knows we're coming. We try to keep the staff in the dark a little bit about the drills, and that way we'll know in the after-action review how successful we are.
And part of the reason we do that is because we're not going to be forewarned if something were to happen in any one of our buildings. No one's going to warn us ahead of time. So I think, in addition, another part of that that's really important is that once we do a drill or a lockdown, we then all get together and meet and we figure out, okay, what did we do really, really well during that, and where are the places that we really need to improve. And so what I do with the group afterwards is then we have these conversations, the police have input, the fire department has input, the principal has input, and then it's incumbent upon the principal to then develop a corrective action plan so that we can look at those areas in need of improvement, write up what we need to do better, and then those corrective action plans are submitted to me and we discuss them at the district-wide safety meeting so that we can continue to get better and better and better.
And practice does help everybody. And just so you do know, I talk to chiefs all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and this district as a team are so advanced in everything that we do, from the unification drills, from the intruder drills. Other school systems aren't doing that, and we are. And I've talked to those chiefs. In fact, they want to come and witness what we're doing because we're almost like a model here. So. And it's because of everybody that you see sitting here up on the stage working together.
So we're going to move along to response. And one of the things that I do have to compliment everybody up at the table here is that when we talk about sort of after action work and after action responses, we do, when we have a drill or an incident, we do have real, sometimes hard conversations about what did we do right, what can we get better. And an example of that is, and a couple of examples of that relate to how we've needed to make sure that we have give first responders the best information that we can give them. And one of that is the simple fact that sometimes our first responders aren't familiar with our schools. So we've understood that issue, and we made sure that mapping of the schools and all the important details of the schools became available to our first responders in various formats, but whether it's paper formats, digital formats, thumb drives, all kinds of things. And that becomes really important in terms of cutting down the response time for first responders. Another learning that we had over the past few years was you would think that we are awash in communication devices. The problem is we are awash in communication devices, and under a stressful incident, everybody gets on their phone. So landline coverage and cell phone coverage can be disrupted just because of traffic. We figured that out and invested in higher grade radios that allow us to respond directly or contact the 911 dispatch center directly from the from each school via radios. So those are the kind of things that we always look at in terms of improving our response. Does anybody want to sort of add a little more to response and how we always think about reducing the time to respond to an incident? That's sort of second nature.
You know, it's easy for us because fire responses are fire responses, and so it's really not, I hate to say it's not a big deal to us, it's obviously a huge deal, but that's not really an earth-shattering thing. I think the biggest takeaway from this moving into sort of as we morph down into the, again, we'll talk, I'm guessing I'm going to get the incident command portion?
Yeah, that's a perfect time to talk about this. Perfect time. Yeah.
Okay, so incident command is about a 3-week course at the National Fire Academy, so I'll try and strip it down here to its sort of bare bones. So the incident command system is an incident management system that was really born out of the western part of the country in the 70s and 80s with really large wildfires where lots and lots of different jurisdictions and different agencies were responding to these fires, and they sort of put together this system now that is actually mandated by the federal government, the National Incident Management System, that communities have to train in and have to adopt and have to operate under an incident command system. It's a really big phrase for basically an uninterrupted chain of responsibility, and what it really breaks down to is that it's different jurisdictions, different agencies, different stakeholders who may have a portion of responsibility for a large-scale incident are all at the same table, and in the event of an incident are effectively all at the same command post. So, and that's where what Pat talks about where the communication comes in. So it basically is a way so that in the event that there is some sort of large-scale emergency incident, whether it be something we know is coming like a hurricane, or whether it be something like a school bus accident, or whether it be some sort of other unplanned for large-scale incident, it's so that the Falmouth Police Department, the Falmouth Fire Department, the Falmouth School Department, whoever has a stake in that are all in the same place and all have the ability to communicate with each other so that there isn't a duplication of effort, but more importantly, so that something that's important that needs to get done doesn't get missed. And it's something that the fire departments have done. We've done incident command for 30 years. I mean, incident command, we use the incident command system in the fire service 365 days a year. It was something that, you know, sort of the next people kind of on the bus were the police departments. And again, like Chief Dunn said, the Falmouth PD is way ahead of the curve as far as a more generic communication language whereby we're all able to speak to each other, whereby we're not duplicating resources, and again, hopefully not missing an important resource that needs to come. And other places across the country are sort of getting better at that. And now to have representatives from the school department at an emergency type situation to be at that table, at that command post, so that we're all communicating, all getting information together. That's basically, that's 3 weeks of incident command, basically in a nutshell. Is there anything else you can think of I missed, Craig, or is that?
One of the things that has been happening with training for the incident command system, we've gone out to some of the meetings that happen before the school year starts with some of the staff, and Deputy Smith has done the training with Bob, is that we've actually noticed now that just for a simple fire alarm, even a fire drill, that the principal is coming out and going to the command post because they know what it is, they know who they need to talk to, which has greatly increased, our communication, especially if it's something other than a fire drill where might have been something that happened in the school. We don't have to try to search out for anyone to come talk to us. They're coming to us because they know what vehicle to look for.
And the other thing that we're fortunate here in Falmouth is we have the Consolidated Dispatch Center. And they're talking with each other in there, so they know what the fire needs, they know what the police needs, no matter what the incident. When the 911 call comes in, they can already dispatch it instead of having to call 2 different agencies. So that's been helpful in bringing us all together also.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, compliment the Civilian Dispatch Center. We've met with Dave Diago a couple of times, and he's a terrific resource for the community also, and has become a vital part of our work. I'm going to move along to recovery, and Joanne and Tim, maybe if you guys can speak a little bit about some of the work that we've begun on this. And when you think about recovery, you can think about sort of the short-term work that needs to be done, but also the long-term work that needs to be done. And that's kind of the goal that we've asked them to begin to work towards formatting.
So Joanne has been very passionate about making sure that our district has the training and the structure that it needs to address the emotional well-being of our students and staff in the event of an emergency. The CEMP calls for the creation of a behavioral or emotional crisis team, which we actually formed about 2 months ago. It's comprised of nurses, school adjustment counselors, local counselors in the community, members of the Falmouth Fire Department, and other various members of the school department from all 7 schools, with the idea that we're creating a singular team that in the event of a crisis at a school or related to a school, we know how to respond as a team. We've had some issues come up, some crises come up over the last couple of years where we kind of realized after the fact that we were kind of scrambling to get the people and the resources and the structure we needed. So we've already had meetings. We've identified that we need to have psychological first aid training as something that this group needs to know how to properly address the needs of the students or the staff, whatever the crisis may be. We're working on identifying dates and someone to provide that for us. And it's a solid team. We're going to continue to meet throughout the school year and then on a monthly basis going forward. And Joanne has done an excellent job kind of spearheading that effort.
Yeah, I just want to say that, the National Response Framework and a lot of work that's been done around the country because of the tragedies that have taken place in school has really given us a lot of blueprints, a lot of best practices, a lot of good information that's out there for us to adopt if we, can make it happen. And as an adjustment counselor in the district for 13 years, we on a daily basis manage small-scale crises. That's what we do. But then there are those events that affect staff and more students and families, and it's not uncommon that an event may overwhelm the existing personnel in that building. And it's at those times where we need to be able to reach out in a very seamless manner to other members of our school department team, maybe crisis counselors from other buildings, the adjustment counselors in other buildings, to be on board to help us out. But it's really nice to have a plan. And just to piggyback on what the fire chief was saying, that incident command structure not only gathers information, but it also dispatches information, because there's a lot of people doing different jobs. And when you arrive on the scene of a crisis, it looks just like that. What's going on? It's pandemonium. Who knows what are we doing? Who's doing what? But this command structure is always, it's constant situational awareness. It's knowing where the needs are. It's identifying people that need, in my case, some additional emotional support. It's checking in with people and maybe referring them to other caregivers. But it's really having a process and a system and a team of people that The incident command doesn't have to worry about doing that job because they might be looking at a lot of issues that may involve the structure, the facility, as well as the individuals in the facility. So the behavioral health crisis team that we formed will provide all of the members with the same core action training on psychological first aid, so that wherever we were called, regardless of the size of the event, we would come on scene, we would get an understanding of what's been happening, we would begin to meet with people who might be congregating, assessing those folks that might be in more distress, and providing support. And then as time goes on, some people, depending on the sort of nature of the event, the proximity that they might have to other people that may have been involved, we may want to monitor the response, the long-term response, how they're doing over time, and working more closely with the providers that they may already have, that they may already be working with. So it's a model that's available to us. It's something that's been tried. It's considered best practices, and I think it will help us all feel in an emergency situation that we can determine quickly, how many individuals do we need to be brought on board to provide that needed support, and how best can we roll it out. So I'm excited about it.
Yes, thanks. So I also want to bring people's eyes to, it also talks about recovery is also physical facilities. And unfortunately, more often than not, for schools, physical recovery is something that we need to address almost every winter with burst pipes and things like that. I do have to compliment, all of our staff members, including our custodial staff. They're the ones who, when the pipe bursts in the middle of the night, they are the ones responding to this. So recovery is everybody's job, and it just sort of, the focus depends on what type of recovery is needed. We're almost done with sort of our presentation. Does anyone, these are some of the things, I think we've talked about all of these things. Let's just go through that correctly. Yep. Does anybody want to talk about anything else that we haven't touched on? Go ahead, Bob.
One of the reasons that we have this meeting tonight is communication. So it's a crucial part of the whole process. And if something's going on, we want the parents to know that we know what we're doing, and we will get you the information as soon as possible. There'd be a public information officer at the command post, and we will get information out to parents and the media as quickly as possible. It's very stressful for a parent to know that their kid is in a school and an incident has gone on. They want to know what's going on, and they want to know that the schools know what they're doing. And that's why we're having this meeting tonight, and we really work hard at this. So the information officer at the command post will get out information in as many ways as possible, as quickly as possible, so that you as parents know what's going on and how to best help us manage the incident.
And on that note about helping us, I mean, we work well together. We're always meeting, but we can't do it alone. We rely on the students to, if they see something, to say something, and we need to create an environment where they feel comfortable doing that. And we need everyone in this room, not just up here, but in the audience that has a child in the school to also be part of our team and to look for clues. Ask your child about their school day. Maybe the information that they give you might, be a clue or a key that you might want to call law enforcement, because it might be an issue that we are interested in. Let us be the ones to vet it, to see if it's a credible issue or threat. Don't, the days of he didn't mean it or she didn't mean it or some threat couldn't have been serious, those days are over. We need the community to help us, to get us the information so we can act on it. Thanks.
Go ahead.
And one other thing I don't think we've talked about, and I'm going to let the lieutenant talk about this, though, we haven't touched on, is the opioid crisis that's going on in town. And we all collectively have a pretty active role in trying to deal with that. But I think Lieutenant O'Malley can just talk briefly about what we've done and what we continue to do in the schools.
So over the last few years, I've met with every 8th grade health class because of the fact that they know what's going on in Falmouth and in the Cape and the country in terms of the opioid crisis. But I bring the actual stats from actually what's happening in Falmouth. And, we show them how the ages of, the overdoses are so much younger. It's not any news to the students and, especially the elementary school age, staff here that, they know that they have multiple, kids that have lost parents, some losing both of them to it. And it's just something they do get information from the police and the sheriff's department, but this is something that's specific to the numbers that we actually have here in Falmouth. And it's been a pretty eye-opening experience for a lot of the kids. And we have had a lot of kids that have come up afterwards and saying, yes, I understand exactly how that is because, my parent had overdosed or, another close family member. Yes, and well, actually in the class I show them and I talk about Narcan, and all of the nursing staff has been trained in the use of Narcan and has Narcan.
Our actual medical drill we did 2 weeks ago actually involved Narcan, which for me it was the first time I'd ever seen it administered. So it was really important for us to be doing these drills. If God forbid our nurse is unavailable when something like that happens, I actually had no idea what it looked like, how it was administered, or what it does until that day. So these drills are really helpful for all of us to get on the same page with that.
So as we move forward, we think about what are we now considering? Moving forward, we always want to get better. We always want to tweak the plan. We're looking very closely at our building entry points and our entryways. Are we being consistent when we allow people into our buildings? Can we see when people come into our buildings, who they are, where they're going? Are we checking them in? So we're taking a really hard look at our entry points. We are piloting Lobby Guard. It's a visitor management system. It's a pilot program at the Morse Pond School. I'm sending principals to Alice training this summer so that they can come back and talk about what their experience was, and do we now sort of morph what we're doing with a little bit of Alice, and Alice is the alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. It's a way of dealing with an issue of a shooter in a building. I've had 3 phone calls about the idea of metal detectors in the buildings, and when people say to me, well, are you going to do it? I say, everything's being considered. So anytime anyone has called me and said, well, did you think about this, particularly after the Florida incident, I said, everything's on the table. We're looking at our safety technology. Again, it's around cameras in the building, who's monitoring them, how many do we have, what are our systems for coming into the buildings when you have to push and buzz to get in. Certainly our communication technology, we're taking a look at that. So everything is on the table right now as we move forward to get better at what we need to do to keep your kids safe. And again, it's also about balance. Some people have the sense that we're doing too much in schools, and are we creating anxiety by doing all these things around safety for kids? Should we be doing this? Are we making our schools more like prisons? So there are lots of questions and concerns out there moving forward, and it is about balance. So now I'd like to open it up to any questions from any of you about what we do in the schools or in the community.
Why don't we start right over here and then teams? Go first. So I'm going to say this. Go ahead. Sure.
My name is Tina Torin, and I spoke with you, Chief Dunn, and you, Detective Smith, thank you, about the incident that was put on Facebook where there was an EEC licenser that was pretending to, a person was pretending to be an EEC licenser. So as the coordinator for the Coalition for Children, I am sort of like the link between the community and the Falmouth Public Schools. And by community, I mean parents, but I'm also the link between the early childhood providers and the Falmouth Public Schools. And so as we move forward with this plan and command, I would like you to consider us as part of that outreach when there is an incident in town, because a lot of us have childcare where your kids are located, and they need to know so they can take the kids out of the backyard or off of the playground, or if somebody's dashing around. And if I don't even want to invite some of this conversation, but it's very serious. So instead of thinking about the system as K through 12, perhaps we can think about it as pre-K through 12. And again, thank you for your time. Both of you emailed me and spoke to me. And I think that there's something that we can really do to tighten this sort of community of support. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thanks. Great point. Great point.
So, yeah, Tina, it was great speaking with you as well. I think now this will open up the line of communications between the police and those private daycare operators. We're more than happy to find common ground or where we can get the word out to not only public schools, but also to the private area. And I know we discussed a couple of ways we can do that through social media. You providing a list of the police department of all the providers in Falmouth, and as well as Code Red, which is run by the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. And I urge all daycare providers to join up with Code Red so that if we do put a message out community-wide or a certain sector of the community in an emergency, you will be informed. Because in a real emergency, it'll be difficult for the police to contact one specific daycare provider, in real time. After the fact, we could, but if you were signed up for Code Red, you would get the information in a timely fashion.
I also think, Tina, that since you are in the administration building, you actually have an office there, that perhaps including you in our district-wide safety team or our district-level safety team might be really important, because that way you're also getting more information about what the district's doing in our partnership with the police department and the fire department, and you will see that as it grows. Just an idea. Yeah, was it not the same question? Okay.
Would actually call you to tell you there's an incident going on.
So is that similar to what public school already uses? Is that the system that is generally?
I don't know what the school uses.
We do all calls, connect dead calls.
It's the same, probably the same idea. We use it through the sheriff's department, like when we have Alzheimer's patients missing and things like that. We need this public assistance and assisting us in different neighborhoods. And it can be blocked off by streets and different areas of town.
It's kind of a different system that has the same purpose.
You have to physically, what beauty of it is it can be cell phone based. So this is a program right with the county sheriff's office. So one beauty of it is that you can do, it's geographically based. So you can take a neighborhood, let's say we've used it for, we have an Alzheimer's patient who's walked away in Hatchville, you can do it that way. So those are two good things about it. But you have to physically go, and the more the merrier. So we can get that information. I've got the information in my office, the police have that information. Whereby any entity, we encourage anybody, we can use that. We use that notification system for. We probably underutilize it a little bit. We use it a lot for, like I said, we've used it several times for missing folks. We've used it for some notifications in some of the previous storms as far as cars and things go. But it's a really good system. But something that you have to sort of sign up for.
So that's the clarification. People have to go sign up for it.
That's fine. So I just want to make sure I understand. Does that system also be utilized when, let's say, there's a lockdown? For instance, this is not the first, or the second, or the third, or the fourth. This is now the fifth time that something was going on, specifically the school walkers, and we are in walking vicinity to the North Falmouth school. And we only find out because the parents have found out. Because there's something that I didn't know. I'm not a parent in town. I don't know what happens, but the parents are notified immediately. That's a little bit, I'm not sure if that system, if it works cohesively with what you do. But that's a close concern for us, specifically what Tim was saying, communications on the playground or things like that.
So,
How do we go about
so I think
making sure we're on the same page with you?
I think my conversation with Tina over the phone kind of prompted this. We, as a police department, can do better to get you the information as a private daycare provider. And that's one way that I kind of suggested that there's a way we can reach out to the private sector through Code Red. So you would just have to go on the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office, sign up, give your information, and we will then have to make a concerted effort to use Code Red more than we have in the past when we have an issue that we feel not only impacts a certain school, but also that general immediate vicinity around that school, which would include the daycare providers. Sometimes we put a school in lockdown because it's school specific. It might just be on those grounds. But if we feel that it's something that could impact outside of that school property, then we can use Code Red more than we have in the past. Like we said, we usually use it for missing people. We're reaching out to the public to kind of keep their eyes open for somebody that we're looking for that might be in some sort of distress. But going forward, after talking to Tina, Code Red could be something that may benefit you as well as us.
I don't have the microphone. My name is Amy Castleton, and I'm here as a parent. First of all, I would like to say things have really changed since I graduated in 2001. I'm very proud and honored to hear what you guys have all been up to, and I feel confident sending my children who are old enough to Falmouth Public Schools. I am the founder of the Good Grief Project that's based out of Boston, but since returning home, we are now implementing a project into Falmouth, Stillwater, Mashpee, and Barnstable, and we are going to be launching in the fall. And I just kind of want to support what Tina is saying with carrying these programs towards the younger children, because I'm a certified grief support specialist, and research proves that the world is so stressful, unfortunately, that our children are grieving as early as infancy, which means we have several child cares and daycares here that have children age, what the age range is, 0 to 6. And I would love, as a parent, to see some of these programs that you're offering, to offer them to staff in Montessori, little kids. I can even think of some of the private daycares that are in town, because I'm sure you guys can all agree, we're all here for the same reason, keeping the children in our community safe. And I'd like to know more about how we can bring public and private together so that staff can have a police officer come by every now and then, just check in, or have the fire department come by and just see, if you agree with, like fire safety things, if you agree going this way is, the best way. Are there any financial resources to kind of move us all together a little bit more? Because we've talking about Alice training, and you, sir, and Red were talking about doing
psychological first aid.
Yeah, I would love to have the opportunity for my job's teachers to be able to be possibly trained in that. I'm just asking, financial resources. Is there a way to kind of bring this to the private sector as well? Because unfortunately, we do have kids that are 2 years old who are grieving over a father or a parent, dying of overdosing. And it's just a very stressful world that our kids are living in. And I think seriously considering bringing the community together as a whole, no matter private or crucial these days.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, absolutely. As far as training, I have 2 officers in the police department that are trained, certified ALICE trainers, and we've trained different private businesses in the Falmouth community on ALICE training. Just recently, as of last month, I sent an officer to New Hampshire. Some of you may have seen Yarmouth PD held a 2-hour forum and it's geared on a 2-hour forum for the average citizen, how to survive an active shooter attack. So if you're in a mall, if you're in a movie theater, and things like that. So I've just got another officer that's been trained in that, and we're just out training now. We're working with the libraries and things like that. And if you watch us on the newspaper and follow us on Facebook and our website, you'll see that we are going to start offering it to the community as a 2-hour training piece. And that is something that if you had your daycares providers, a group of you, we could just gear it towards them. So we could answer some specific questions if that's possible. So, if we had a contact with that, we could do that. So as far as some local training, we have done that. We've done some very large businesses in town because the same thing, it's not just school violence, it's workplace violence. And so those are some of the things that we have available at the Falmouth Police Department.
Another vehicle by which to attach the private daycares to the public schools is through Lainey Cook Johnson, who is the early education and care director for the district, who works a lot with the private daycares. So, and I know she's done training on other things for private daycare, and she would be, I'm sure she would be very willing to work with you around accessing some of the training and resources, because I know she's already done that for other trainings. But she would be another key resource that you could tap into.
Yes.
I'm Diana Phillips, I'm the regional director for early education care, and I came to speak prior to this meeting, so I just wanted to extend my thanks to the Falmouth Police Department that was an issue because individuals weren't always not know exactly who they were. But I know that there are a lot of concerns regarding both center-based programs and the child care homes, particularly Falmouth, but statewide is an issue as well. And I just wanted to extend that we will protect the individuals on this group to make that connection and maybe get a training just notified community in this area. So I'll make sure that before I leave everyone, I have given them my contact information, and maybe we have to listen to the educators, we have license them out of our partners. So it'd be a nice collaboration.
That would be great. We would really appreciate that. Yes.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for putting this on. Thank you for all of the planning and preparation that you guys have done. I'm new to the school district, and I was wondering if you can talk generally about how the parent notification and reunification process works. I understand you can't publish the plans, but if you could explain that a little bit.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And actually, Greg had asked me to do that, and I'm just going to circle back. So, reunification, there's an issue in the building.
And it doesn't even have to be criminal. It can be that a boiler, let's just say a boiler exploded, and we had to get kids out of a particular building and move them to another building. So we do that. This is where Greg is critical, both for transportation and for setting the process up by which we then get a hold of parents. So we start moving kids out. It's very orderly. We've run a couple of elementary schools through this whole practice. We figure out the site that we are transporting the students to, and then we actually set up stations. And whatever the school is, if it's T-Ticket, they have all their information around all their kids, and this is already pre-planned. So you take your information, you go, you set up your different tables, we get a call out to parents, and then parents start coming in to pick up their kids. But we check through Power School, which Greg had mentioned that it is critical that we keep the information updated in Power School, because the stations are set up with computer access. So if you're coming up and saying, I'm so-and-so and I'm here to pick up my child, we double-checked so that we can see who you are, that you have access to your child, and then we have, the kids might be in the auditorium, because we're trying to keep the kids really calm while we're dealing with parents. And we'd have a runner who knows your child from that school, bring your child to you, we reunify, you sign off, you take your child home. But this has been in process and practice for a while, and each time we do it, we find out different pieces where we need to do it a little bit better. Go ahead.
Yes, the Connect Ed would go out saying, it would probably come from me in that type of an incident, that there has been an issue at, let's say, the T-Ticket school, and students are being transported to Falmouth High School. Yes, you would know that. And then we are very careful about to whom we release your child. And that can be a little bit sticky, but it's all about keeping that child safe. Yes?
Hi, I'm a parent of a child with a disability, and I wonder if one of the officers could talk about if there's any disability awareness training going on at either the firehouse or at the with the police officers in town. And then also I'm wondering, as a parent of a young child with a disability, if there are any protocol or procedures in place for students like my daughter, it could maybe have a difficult time following the directions, or could look non-compliant to somebody coming in to help, or what kind of is on the table in lines of disability awareness.
Anyone want to take that? Tim or Jan?
So in the event of any type of safety issue, our staff, their first responsibility is to the kids in the building and to be with their kids. And so, for example, our programs with students with disabilities, our teachers know that the students in their program are within their jurisdiction. Where they move with them. And they understand their role is to be a liaison between law enforcement, fire, parents, and help those students and communicate the needs of those children. So, it would be to ask the police or fire to understand the needs of every student in the school is unrealistic. So that's what we rely on our staff to be able to communicate on their behalf.
As far as the law enforcement side, all our officers go to in-service training. They go to the academy, but they also get yearly in-service training. And over the years, there have been a lot of training to deal with kids with disabilities, specifically with disability. So, all our officers are trained in that. We also, the Falmouth Police Department is also partnered with capabilities. We have a young man who's a greeter a couple days a week for us, and so we know how to deal with kids with disability. So.
Great, thank you.
So on the fire department side, the biggest portion of that in terms of interacting with someone with disabilities is through the EMS side. We actually have the unique position that we actually have one of our firefighter paramedics who had a son that is severely autistic, and he put on the classes himself to his fellow firefighters for it. But we also, just much like the police had in the service, every other year we have refresher training for paramedics and EMTs, and that is a portion of what's covered in those trainings.
And that's one of the reasons why our officers visit the schools all the time, so that we take away that anxiety level. So it's not out of the norm to see a police officer show up at the school by doing the High Five Fridays and coming during lunchtime, having lunch with the kids. And a lot of our officers have children in school. When my kids were young enough to be in school, I would go and have lunch with them. And my son is autistic, so we really like to partner with the schools and the children, and it's all about keeping them safe.
Yes. Andrew?
So I wanted to ask a question about the school resource officer, and I really like what you had to say about the work you're doing in building relationships, and I think that's really important. That said, the point was made earlier that you're a police officer first and foremost, and police officers are trained differently than school staff and teachers. So I was wondering if there is any specialized training that school resource officers or other officers who are in the schools undergo, particularly people who voice concerns about interacting with students of color or maybe English language learners. Is there additional training that you undergo in the department?
So I did attend the NASRO course for school resource officers. They teach you a lot about juvenile laws. They teach you a lot about interacting with youth. I've taken policing the teenage brain, which actually taught me the difference between an adolescent brain and an adult brain, and how you can't expect always the same reactions and the same risk versus reward types of things. So I have taken those trainings. Circling back to it, I do depend on the school a lot. I don't address rules. So, you know, for example, if a kid is walking down the hall and he has a hoodie on, that's not for me to address. That's the school administration's role. And that's one of the things I learned is to, you know, differentiate. That's not what I'm there for. And I don't get involved in those things. So I hope that answered your question.
Megan? I just want to piggyback on that. And so I think we'll all agree that we need to get our resource officers, especially in particular in the 6th grade. And is it just a budget and a manpower issue why that's not happening, or is it?
Yes, that's the easiest question. Like I said, back in 2008, 2009, the police department was 66. Right now, we're at 58. And those other positions are unfunded. I am pleased to say that this year's town meeting, they did fund one position, and so we're going to have 59. My goal is to continue to increase the department back to those standards in this, 2008, 2009, where we could have 2 resource officers in the schools. But like I said, I didn't want to leave the schools unattended, so the best we can do is do the substations and have the daily visits.
Any other questions or concerns?
Hi,
Yes.
My name is Rebecca, and I have a question that may have already been kind of answered, but I didn't know if the Falmouth Police Department, if police officers trained in mental illness first aid. I actually had a call almost a year ago from my son who has bipolar, and he had a psychotic break in the car. And my husband and I, for 2 years, had role played like what would happen, and it was the scariest day of my life. I actually even seen John, my husband, who say, I need the police at our house. You have to explain it's a bipolar disorder. He's not to be a brat or a jerk, and he had a psychotic break in the car, and had a younger child. And it was so scary because I just didn't know what he was going to do or what he was capable of. And thankfully, he was aggressive towards me and my sister, but waiting for the police to come, it was like, I don't even know how long it took, but it just seemed like an eternity. I will say the officers were really good when they came, but I just wanted to know, are they trained to deal with that?
Again, in service, every year they try to do a little bit of something different. The last couple of years they have been teaching dealing with mental illness. One thing that I just recently did, and it's on an international level and it's on a statewide level, is a program, if you Google it, it's called the One Mind program. And that's exactly what that is dealing with mental health. And I took the pledge along with 190 other Massachusetts police departments. And it can take up to 3 years because of the training, just what we talked about, mental health first aid, getting our officers trained. Currently, right now, we have maybe 4 officers that are fully trained. And what we've done, because not only is the opioid problem here in town, most of our calls are dealing with mental illness in one form or another, and it's becoming another large crisis here. So that's why we did that One Mind program, that we will be training our entire department, will be certified in it's an 8-hour course in mental health first aid. Currently, right now, we have 4. We've partnered with Human Services. Similar to what we do, go out and visit the overdose people. We also go out and deal with people with mental illness and try to get them some services through Mike Abbott of Falmouth Human Services. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We're going to continue doing it until the entire department is trained.
Any other questions or concerns? Yes.
a director of a daycare with children in town, and I'm still a little unclear. Are we going to be notified when there's a lockdown in our area? Through who? Through the police that will be prorated?
We're asking you.
Is it really happening, or is it going to be from, the school system? Because I've been calling for about 5 or 6 years now to be put on the list, police swallows, there's a lockdown. Hasn't happened. It's like I'm a ping pong ball between, the school system saying no pump, we say no pump, school system. So I'm still a little unclear.
I'll tell you on the
Are we
police.
actually going to know?
I'll tell you on the police side, no. Because you know what? There's no list.
Okay.
You have daycare. We don't know where the daycares are. We're depending on you. Register with Code Red. As we said, we can always do better. If there is a lockdown, again, if there's a school lockdown and it has to do with, you have to remember, if the school lockdown can happen a couple of ways. The incident can be in the school, or the incident can be outside the school that we want to protect the school. We will do better if there is something that we can call. If I can just call dispatch and say, notify the daycares in this area, they'll call the sheriff's department, put out a message. If you don't register, no, you're not going to get notified. And it's seriously, I'm not aware, the police department has no list of every daycare that's in the town of Falmouth. I'm just being honest with you. Can we do better as a team, work together? Yes. So if somebody wants to put a list together, and somebody in that list wants to get registered, we will do better notifying. Promise you that.
Say too, I'm a licensed daycare provider, and I did get an email from the EEC when that incident happened. So I just want it to be known that maybe they don't have everybody on there, or maybe it was just home daycares that were being notified, but I was notified, and so I just wanted to be known that I think they're trying to make somewhat of an effort, and like you said, if that list isn't out there, there's tons of home daycare, so it's, I did want to say that I could get notified, just so people kind of.
I think the key here is just opening up the lines of communications between the police and the private daycare centers. We're open to that. Before tonight, maybe we weren't reaching out like we should have. Unfortunately, I think it's because we didn't really know who was out there as far as private daycare. So I think once we open up the communication lines, we'll come up with a solution that works for everybody.
Just curious if anybody has the answer. How many private daycares are there in Falmouth?
There are 37 private and family-based childcare.
Okay.
So I didn't tease out what their percentages of
Okay, thank you. Didn't know
Any other questions or concerns? All right, I just want to really thank the panel for taking the time out tonight to.
And thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. Have a great